El is a Northwest Semitic word meaning God or deity, or referring to any one of multiple major ancient Near East deities. A rarer spelling, Ela, represents the predicate form in Old Akkadian and in Amorite. The word is derived from the Proto-Semitic archaic biliteral El, meaning God. Specific deities known as El or Il include the supreme god of the Canaanite religion, the supreme god of the Mesopotamian Semites in the pre-Sargonic period, and the god of the Hebrew Bible. Linguistic forms and meanings. Cognate forms are found throughout the Semitic languages. They include Ugaritic Il, place, Lm, Phoenician El, place, Lm, Hebrew El, place, Elam, Aramaic El, Akkadian Ilu, place, Elanu. In Northwest Semitic use, El was both a generic word for any god and the special name or title of a particular god who was distinguished from other gods as being the god. El is listed at the head of many pantheons. El is the father god among the Canaanites. However, because the word sometimes refers to a god other than the great god El, it is frequently ambiguous as to whether El followed by another name means the great god El with a particular epithet applied or refers to another god entirely. For example, in the Ugaritic texts, Il-Mlk is understood to mean El the king, but Il-Hd the god Hadad. The Semitic root LH may be El with a parasitic H, and El may be an abbreviated form of LH. In Ugaritic the plural form meaning gods is ILHM, equivalent to Hebrew Elohim, powers. But in Hebrew this word also occurs for semantically singular God. The stem El is found prominently in the earlier strata of East Semitic, Northwest Semitic, and South Semitic groups. Personal names including the stem El are found with similar patterns in both Amorite and South Arabic, which indicates that probably already in Proto-Semitic El was both a generic term for God, and the common name or title of a single particular god. Proto-Sinaitic, Phoenician, Aramaic, and Hittite texts. The Egyptian god Ptah is given the title Dugati, Lord of Gath, in a prism from Lachish which has on its opposite face the name of Amenhotep II. The title Dugati is also found in Cerubit text 353. Cross points out that Ptah is often called the Lord of Eternity and thinks it may be this identification of El with Ptah that lead to the epithet, Olam, eternal, being applied to El so early and so consistently. A Phoenician inscribed amulet of the 7th century BCE from Arslan Tash may refer to El. The text was translated by Rosenthal as follows. An eternal bond has been established for us. Ashur has established for us, and all the divine beings and the majority of the group of all the holy ones, through the bond of heaven and earth forever. However, cross-translated the text as follows. The Eternal One has made a covenant oath with us, Asherah has made with us, and all the sons of El, and the great council of all the holy ones, with oaths of heaven and ancient earth. In some inscriptions, the name El-Kwan, Aaz meaning El Creator of Earth, appears, even including a late inscription at Leptis Magna in Tripolitania, dating to the 2nd century. In Hittite texts, the expression becomes the single name Ilku-Nirsa, this Ilku-Nirsa appearing as the husband of Ashadu and father of 77 or 88 sons. In a Huron hymn to El, he is called Ilbrtn, Ildn, which cross-takes is El of the covenant, and El the judge, respectively. The Phoenician god Baal is generally identified either with the Northwest Semitic god El or with the god Dagon. Amorite inscriptions from Zinc early refer to numerous gods, sometimes by name, sometimes by title, especially by such titles as Elaborate, God of the people, Ilabaka, God of your father, Ilabini, God of our father, and so forth. Various family gods are recorded, divine names listed as belong to a particular family or clan, sometimes by title and sometimes by name, including the name Il, God. In Amorite personal names, the most common divine elements are Il, Hadad, Adad, and Dagon. It is likely that Il is also very often the god called in Akkadian texts Amuru or Ilamuru, Ugarit and the Levant. For the Canaanites and the ancient Levantine region as a whole, El or Il was the supreme god, the father of mankind and all creatures. He also fathered many gods, most importantly Hadad, Jam, and Mo, each sharing similar attributes to the Greco-Roman gods, Zeus, Poseidon, and Hades respectively. As recorded on the clay tablets of Ugarit, El is the husband of the goddess Asherah. 3 pantheon lists found at Ugarit begin with the 4 gods. Il, Ib is the name of a generic kind of deity, perhaps the divine ancestor of the people, El, Danu, and Baal Sappan. Though Ugarit had a large temple dedicated to Dagon and another to Hadad, there was no temple dedicated to El. El is called again and again Toru, El. He is Batnu bin Wati, Abu Bani, Ili, and Abu Adamai. He is Kariyunu, Olam, the epithet Olam appearing in Hebrew form in the Hebrew name of God, El, Olam, God eternal, in Genesis 21.33. He is Hatikuka. El is the grey-bearded ancient one, full of wisdom, Malku, Abasamima, El Gibber. He is also named Ltpn of unknown meaning, variously rendered as Lapan, Latipan, or Lutpana. El, and his major son, Hadad, are symbolized both by the bull, and both wear bull horns on their headdresses. In Canaanite mythology, El builds a desert sanctuary with his children and his 2 wives, leading to speculation that at one point El was a desert god. The mysterious Ugaritic text Shacharan Shalom tells how El came to shores of the sea and saw 2 women who bobbed up and down. El was sexually aroused and took the 2 with him, killed a bird by throwing a staff at it, and roasted it over a fire. He asked the women to tell him when the bird was fully cooked, and to then address him either as husband or as father, for he would henceforward behave to them as they called him. They saluted him as husband. He then lay with them, and they gave birth to Shacharan Shalom. Again El lay with his wives, and the wives gave birth to the gracious gods, cleavers of the sea, children of the sea. The names of these wives are not explicitly provided, but some confusing rubrics at the beginning of the account mention the goddess Atirat, who is otherwise El's chief wife, and the goddess Ramayu, otherwise unknown. In the Ugaritic Baal cycle, El is introduced dwelling on Mount Lel at the fountains of the 2 rivers at the spring of the 2 deeps. He dwells in a tent according to some interpretations of the text, which may explain why he had no temple in Ugarit. As to the rivers and the spring of the 2 deeps, these might refer to real streams, or to the mythological sources of the saltwater ocean and the freshwater sources under the earth, or to the waters above the heavens and the waters beneath the earth. In the episode of the Palace of Baal, the god Baal Hadad invites the 70 sons of Atirat to a feast in his new palace. Presumably these sons have been fathered on Atirat by El. In following passages they seem to be the gods in general, or at least a large portion of them. The only sons of El named individually in the Ugaritic texts are Yammo and Ashtar, who may be the chief and leader of most of the sons of El. Baal Hadad is a few times called El's son rather than the son of Dagon as he is normally called, possibly because El is in the position of a clan father to all the gods. The fragmentary text Rs. 24.258 describes a banquet to which El invites the other gods and then disgraces himself by becoming outrageously drunk and passing out after confronting an otherwise unknown hubei, he with the horns and tail. The text ends with an incantation for the cure of some disease, possibly hangover. Hebrew Bible. The Hebrew form appears in Latin letters in Standard Hebrew transcription as El and in Tiberian's Hebrew transcription as El. El is a generic word for God that could be used for any god, including Hadad, Moloch, or Yahweh. In the Tanakh, Elohim is the normal word for a god or the great god, but the form El also appears mostly in poetic passages and in the patriarchal narratives attributed to the priestly source of the documentary hypothesis. It occurs 217 times in the Masoretic text, 73 times in the Psalms and 55 times in the Book of Job, and otherwise mostly in poetic passages or passages written in elevated prose. It occasionally appears with the definite article as Ha-El, the God. The theological position of the Tanakh is that the names El and Elohim, when used in the singular to mean the supreme God, refer to Yahweh, beside whom other gods are supposed to be either non-existent or insignificant. Whether this was a long-standing belief or a relatively new one has long been the subject of inconclusive scholarly debate about the prehistory of the sources of the Tanakh and about the prehistory of Israelite religion. In the P strand, YHWH says in Exodus chapter 6 verses 2-3, I revealed myself to Abraham, to Isaac, and to Jacob as El Shaddai, but was not known to them by my name of Yahweh. Before El's revelation with the name of Yahweh, it is said in Genesis chapter 14 verses 18-20 that Abraham accepted the blessing of El when Melchizedek, the king of Salem and high priest of its deity El Elyon, blessed him. One scholarly position is that the identification of Yahweh with El is late, that Yahweh was earlier thought of as only one of many gods, and not normally identified with El. Another is that in much of the Hebrew Bible the name El is an alternate name for Yahweh, but in the Elohist and priestly traditions it is conceived as an earlier name than Yahweh. The name Yahweh is used in the Bible Tanakh in the first book of Genesis chapter 2 verse 4, and Genesis chapter 4 verse 26 says that at that time, people began to call upon the name of the Lord. In some places, especially in Psalm chapter 29, Yahweh is clearly envisioned as a storm god, something not true of El so far as we know. It is Yahweh who is prophesied to one day battle Leviathan the serpent, and slay the dragon in the sea in Isaiah chapter 27 verse 1. The slaying of the serpent in myth is a deed attributed to both Baal-Hadad and Anat in the Ugaritic texts, but not to El. Such mythological motifs are variously seen as late survivals from a period when Yahweh held a place in theology comparable to that of Hadadite, Ugarit, or as late henotheistic, monotheistic applications to Yahweh of deeds more commonly attributed to Hadad, or simply as examples of eclectic application of the same motifs and imagery to various different gods. Similarly, it is argued inconclusively whether El Shaddai, El Olam, El Elyon, and so forth, were originally understood as separate divinities. Albrecht presented his theories on the original differences of such gods in Der Gott der Vater in 1929. But others have argued that from patriarchal times, these different names were in fact generally understood to refer to the same single great god, El. This is the position of Frank Moorcross. What is certain is that the form El does appear in Israelite names from every period, including the name Yisrael, meaning El strives, or struggled with El. According to the Oxford Companion to World Mythology, it seems almost certain that the God of the Jews evolved gradually from the Canaanite El, who was in all likelihood the God of Abraham. If El was the high god of Abraham, Elohim, the prototype of Yahweh, Asherah was his wife, and there are archaeological indications that she was perceived as such before she was in effect divorced, in the context of emerging Judaism of the 7th century BCE. The apparent plural form, lim or lim, gods occurs only 4 times in the Tanakh. Psalm chapter 29, understood as an enthronement psalm, begins, a psalm of David, ascribed to Yahweh, sons of gods, ascribed to Yahweh, glory and strength. Psalm chapter 89 verse 6 has, for who in the skies compares to Yahweh, who can be likened to Yahweh among the sons of gods. Traditionally Bene Elam has been interpreted as sons of the mighty, mighty ones, for El can mean mighty. Though such use may be metaphorical, it is possible also that the expression Elam in both places descends from an archaic stock phrase in which Elam was a singular form with a M enclitic and therefore to be translated as sons of El. The M enclitic appears elsewhere in the Tanakh and in other Semitic languages. Its meaning is unknown, possibly simply emphasis. It appears in similar contexts in Ugaritic texts where the expression bn il alternates with bn ilm, but both must mean sons of El. That phrase with M enclitic also appears in Phoenician inscriptions as late as the 5th century BCE. One of the other two occurrences in the Tanakh is in the Song of Moses, Exodus chapter 15 verse 11, who is like you among the gods, Yahweh. The final occurrence is in Daniel chapter 11 verse 36. And the king will do according to his pleasure, and he will exalt himself and magnify himself over every god. And against the God of gods he will speak outrageous things, and will prosper until the indignation is accomplished. For that which is decided will be done. There are a few cases in the Tanakh where something, El referring to the great God El, is not equated with Yahweh. One is in Ezekiel chapter 28 verse 2, in the taunt against a man who claims to be divine. In this instance, the leader of Tyre, Son of man, say to the prince of Tyre, Thus says the Lord Yahweh, because your heart is proud and you have said, I am El, in the seat of Elohim. I am enthroned in the middle of the seas, yet you are man and not El, even though you have made your heart like the heart of Elohim. Here, El might refer to a generic god, or to a highest god, El. When viewed as applying to the king of Tyre specifically, the king was probably not thinking of Yahweh. When viewed as a general taunt against anyone making divine claims, it may or may not refer to Yahweh depending on the context. In Judges chapter 9 verse 46 we find El Berit, God of the Covenant, seemingly the same as the Baal Berit, Lord of the Covenant, whose worship has been condemned a few verses earlier. See Baal for a discussion of this passage. Psalm chapter 82 verse 1 says, Elohim stands in the council of El, he judges among the gods. This could mean that Yahweh judges along with many other gods as one of the council of the high god El. However, it can also mean that Yahweh stands in the divine council, as El judging among the other members of the council. The following verses in which the God condemns those whom he says were previously named gods and sons of the Most High suggest the God here is in fact El judging the lesser gods. An archaic phrase appears in Isaiah chapter 14 verse 13, Kokabi, El, stars of God, referring to the circumpolar stars that never set, possibly especially to the 7 stars of Ursa Major. The phrase also occurs in the Persian inscription as HKKBM, El. Two other apparent fossilized expressions are Uzzah, El, cedars of God, in Psalm chapter 80 verse 10 and Kahara, El, mountains of God, in Psalm chapter 36 verse 7.